Today, I want to talk a little bit about why I chose to leave my 9 to 5 job and why I'm never going back. If you don't know me, I'm Spencer, and I like to talk about simple living, frugality, and cutting down your technology usage, sometimes through the use of other technologies. So, first of all, I just want to say this video is not a condemnation of you if you work a 9 to 5 job. I understand the reality that pretty much everyone works a 9 to 5 type job. Not everyone, of course, I don't, but most people do, and it's the reality for most people. But I also can recognize that most people don't really like the 9 to 5. I don't think anybody's truly that happy in a 9 to 5 job. And a lot of people are interested in maybe getting out of that and looking at some sort of alternative. And that's something that I definitely felt and that I sought. And now that I'm here, it's not perfect, but I can definitely say I'm much happier where I am now. And I want to talk a little bit more about that today. So I've done a lot of different jobs over my life. I think I've done like before I even reached 26, which is when I really got into my career that I'm in now. I think I'd done probably upwards of 15, maybe close to 20 jobs, different jobs you know, uh, things from mopping up someplace, things from being a security guard to a parking enforcement officer. I worked at a telecommunications place. I worked in the parts department at a car dealership. Those last few jobs specifically, once I was out of school and I was just working for a few years, I was in a typical 9 to 5. I would show up Monday to Friday, I would do my 8 hours, and I would go home. And during that time, it wasn't always that bad, but there was this nagging feeling ever since I got into those 9 to 5 type jobs that it just kind of felt like a bird in a cage. I didn't feel like I really had my freedom. Freedom's always been very important to me. I know it's kind of a nebulous term. It's kind of hard to put a finger on exactly what it is, but you kind of just feel when you have it or when you don't. And I don't fully feel like I have it now, but I feel like I have a lot more of it or a lot closer to what my definition is now than I did back then. At that time, if I wanted to take any time off, I had to ask my boss for it, and oftentimes they were just too swamped to allow that. So I only got my 2 weeks of allotted vacation at best. And then, other than that, I was just kind of waiting for the next long weekend to show up. And I was typically just working for the weekend, like the average person does. That's not a great feeling after a little while, especially if you feel in your heart that you want to do something else. You feel like you have a calling to do something a little bit different. It's pretty soul crushing to feel like you're just kind of on a prison sentence until you're like 60 years old, that you have to come to this place 5 days a week, do your 8 hours a day on the chain gang, and then go home for 2 days off, trying to catch up on life before you go back again. Right? It's not a great feeling. It kind of feels like you're on a treadmill and you just can't get off. And there's a whole consumerism thing that comes from that as well, because people just want to sate that feeling inside, that feeling that something's wrong. And they do that by buying things. They do that by spending their hard earned money on things that make them feel good in the short term. And oftentimes that just sets them back farther, and that really just kind of gets you into this wage slavery situation where you're blowing all your money, you're still kind of living paycheck to paycheck, and you just kind of need this IV drip of a steady pay in order to keep living your life the way you are. But you're never really getting ahead enough that if you wanted to, you could even get out. And that was a huge problem for me. So I kind of knew as soon as I was in my mid 20s in these jobs that I didn't want to spend a lot more time there. I didn't really know how I was going to do it. I was just generally pretty unhappy because it just felt like I wasn't following any path that felt meaningful to me. And I thought, you mean I'm gonna have to do this for like 40 more years before I can stop? Like march to the beat of somebody else's drum, doing something I don't really care about and making very little money in the process. It doesn't seem like a fair deal. And I'm really willing to do whatever it takes to get out of this. I want to try to find some other path for myself because this isn't a path that I can walk for much longer. So at that point, I started to make my plan of attack. I've always been a creative person. I'm a musician and I've been a musician. I've been playing music since I was about 6 years old. Back when I was in high school, elementary school, I always like, instead of writing papers, I convinced my teachers to let me make like little short films and stuff on the subject matter. And at that time, the digital media stuff was all very new. So it was exciting that a student wanted to do something like that. I was able to get away with making these films. So I had, at that time, a lot of experience shooting and I was excited about making films. It was something that I always wanted to do, but I didn't really pursue it when I went to university. I just went and tried to do this sure thing and go into something very standard. I wanted to be a police officer at that time. Ultimately, I realized none of that stuff was for me. The policing, especially, but also just the 9 to 5 in general, a standard job. I didn't really want to be tied to a salary job, especially where I just felt like I was never going to be able to get out when I wanted to. I wanted to be able to take large times at work off to focus on things that are actually important to me, side projects, and just interests that I wanted to do. I think this is especially tough if you have hobbies, a lot of hobbies actively in your spare time that you want to pursue, but you just feel like you don't have time for it. I think a lot of people who do 9 to 5 type jobs eventually just become so disconnected from that stuff because there really isn't too much time to pursue stuff other than those few hours after work, that a lot of your life just becomes about your work. And even if your work's not that exciting, it just kind of becomes all what your life is about. It becomes all consuming. All of your friends become your work friends. All of your hobbies become kind of something related to work or something that maybe a couple of your colleagues are doing. You lose a little bit of touch with yourself. In my case, I really did not want that to happen. I loved playing music, I loved making films, and that was just something that a lot of people around me weren't doing. And it was something that I knew in my heart that I needed to pursue. So I tried to get out. Basically, I just started working this crazy nights job, stocking shelves, started socking away money as much as possible. I ended up getting this telecommunications gig working as like a coordinator for this product that was being sent out to build cell phone towers. Started saving as much money as I could during that time, and I did a 1 year program at a local college to learn the craft of the film industry, the nuts and bolts, the hard skills that would help you be effective on set. At that time, I didn't really know exactly what I was going to do, but I knew that the film industry was all freelance. I knew it was all contract. And I know it's a little bit of a hand to mouth existence at the beginning before you get those contracts built up, because you're really just trying to just take whatever jobs come your way. And when you don't really have a strong network at the beginning, those jobs are going to be few and far between. But for me, it was just worth it as any way to pursue something that was at least related to what I wanted to do, right? It wasn't like I was going to step into my dream job in that field either, but it was a little bit more interesting to me than some car parts or something else that was just really not that in line with what I was into. So yeah, I'm 26 years old and I'm going back to school. I take this 1 year program and I end up doing all this stuff and I end up learning a lot of stuff. I meet a lot of new people who are interested in this kind of stuff and a lot of people who were going back to school as well. And they were also, trying to find their way. They didn't feel like their first thing that they did really fit, and they were trying to find something else that did more so fit. And we were all kind of working on that stuff together, kind of realizing each other's dreams. At the end of it all, I ended up getting an internship with the director of photography who I work with now. And it was honestly huge for me. Didn't just happen right away where I ended up just suddenly loving my life. There was a lot of hard times at the beginning where I really just didn't have enough work. I was only able to get brought out on these projects occasionally when it first started. So I was only making like sometimes like $1,000 a month. Like it was really tough. And I ended up going into debt at the early parts of that, just trying to live, right? Just trying to make it in this kind of weird field of kind of like disparate contracts, trying to put them all together into some sort of piecemeal of an income. But after a couple of years, stuff started to kind of figure itself out. I was able to meet enough people and make a good enough impression on them that I was able to get enough of a network of contracts that I could put together a pretty decent income and eventually start to pay off that student loan and eventually start to save. But the biggest part of doing this job for me is the fact that they work you hard sometimes, right? You actually do work insanely long hours compared to a 9 to 5 job. Prior to that, my only experience with working long days was being a security guard because it was usually a 12-hour shift. We would do a night shift, maybe a 7 p.m. till a 7 a.m. The film industry, that's pretty much just the standard hours. You're always doing a 12-hour shift. And sometimes you're doing a 12-hour shift 5 days in a row, sometimes even 10 days in a row if you're just trying to get an episode done of something and move on to the next thing. You work these crazy hours really hard in big blocks, but Your life is your own. By being an independent contractor, you're kind of a free agent. And that's the way that I like to think of it. I'm my own boss. Like, I end up working under other people when I go and work on these projects, but ultimately, I'm the one who decides whether I go to work or not. I'm the one who decides whether I'm going to take a job or not. And that was a huge draw for me into this industry and why I like doing it so much. I like having control over the things that I do, and I like being able to say no when I don't like something. I like being able to take a couple of weeks off on a whim if I want to work on something else that's important to me, like if I want to work on this very channel. And I wouldn't have had the time to work on something just like this channel had I not worked in something as flexible as the film industry. The film industry slows down a lot in the winter time here, so there's a lot of open space where you can kind of fill it however you want. It's important to save money for those times because you're going to need to dip into some of that cash reserve in order to pay your expenses because there's often not going to be nearly enough work. But you can also take those big gaps in time and you can fill them with stuff that's meaningful to you, and potentially those things can also turn into an income stream as well. You can work on projects like I'm working on here on this YouTube channel, stuff that's actually exciting to me and stuff that's actually meaningful, and you can see results and you don't have to just try to squeeze it in at the end of each day. Now, I'm not going to say that I've had infinite time to work on this channel because after the first month of doing it, work got pretty busy again, and then it's been kind of insane because the more I've been working, I've been trying to squeeze this in on the after hours, and it's sometimes quite tight to do so. But this summer, I wanted to focus more on the channel. I wanted to grow some of the things that I'm doing around here, and I wanted to do some more bigger, exciting projects and put them up on this very channel. And I wouldn't have the time to allocate to this passion project at this point if it wasn't for working in a contract based job, if it wasn't for leaving the 9 to 5. I wouldn't be able to ask my boss just to take, an extra couple of days off here or there because somebody that I want to go shoot is available that day. I would just say, tough luck. That's what I would be told. The boss would say, you know what? No, you work here. If you want to work here, then you got to come in. And that just doesn't work for me. And I know there's a lot of people out there who feel the same way, and you're not really sure exactly how to get into that. I think ultimately what you need to do is you need to kind of find a plan of attack. If you can stomach moving into something like freelance work where it doesn't always fit every temperament because it's kind of stressful to not know where your next gig is coming from, right? A lot of people don't like the stress when you finish a job to not know where the next one's coming or when the next one's coming. But I think once you save up a little bit of money and you have a little bit of a more robust emergency fund sitting there, you can take your foot off the gas, you can worry a little bit less, breathe a little sigh of relief, and you can actually explore what you're interested in. The reality for me is just that I couldn't see myself working a 9 to 5 for very long. When I worked at the car dealership, I used to come up to the front of the dealership and I would just sit there and I would kind of zone out and I would start wiping the table. I would get a cloth and some Windex and I would polish the stainless steel counter at the front and I would just zone out. And oftentimes when I was snapped awake by somebody talking to me or by a customer coming up, I would just think, I can't keep doing this. This is like, it's just something that I can't keep doing this. I can't stay here. I will say some people are able to work 9 to 5 jobs that they're happy with. The job isn't super demanding. They like their coworkers. They don't actually love the job itself, but they like a lot of the things that come with it. They don't find it super intrusive on their life, and it provides them with money that they're able to save, and they've found that they've had a nice balance with that job. And if that's the case with you, then I would say you don't need to take anything else away from this video other than good job, because that's honestly as close to a dream job as most people are going to get. And I think congratulations to you because you've pretty much won. Um, if you feel like me, though, if you feel like, you know, you felt like a bit of a fish out of water, you felt like you didn't really fit in where you were going, and you felt like you needed to do something else, then I would encourage you to try to really get real about what that is. What is it that you want to do? How are you able to get kind of close to that or some sort of freedom, at least in your type of job, that you're able to secure more free time for yourself to work on those passionate things? Because maybe for some people, the thing that they're truly passionate about just can't be monetized in any way. And if they were to monetize it, it might ruin it for them. So I think you can also try to find a way to just take up a job that doesn't take up a lot of space in your life, and it leaves you space to work on those passion projects in your free time. And if you can do that, that's also a good plan as well. Another huge thing is minimalism and frugality. That's a huge part of what I talk about on this channel, and it's been integral to my journey in stepping away from the 9 to 5 and finding a sense of security while working in a rather insecure field. As I mentioned, when I first started in the film industry, times were really tough. I was having a really hard time keeping my head above water. I spent all of the savings that I had, and then I went into debt farther, just trying to get any contacts, building up those contracts, and finding any work to keep paying the bills. It took a little while until that happened, but it wasn't an easy path to start. But honestly, what kept me going was the fact that I didn't really feel like I had anything else that was a better option for me. I knew if I went back to a 9 to 5 job, there'd be that level of security there, but it feels more like an IV drip than security. It feels like it's a lifeline, but it feels like it's not a real life. It feels like it's just something that's going to make you get by, but get by with what? Are you going to get by with your soul intact, or are you going to just feel like it's getting completely sucked out by this job? And that's kind of how I felt, and I knew I couldn't go back to that feeling. So I pushed on, and eventually I came out in a place where it's not perfect, but it's given me the freedom to pursue things like this in the free time. Now, it's not to say that I don't work. I don't want to give somebody the impression that I'm living the high life right now. This has been a really tough year for me because I've been doing a lot of extra work with this channel, and I'm still working just as much as I have in previous years. I'll come off working literally 20 days in a row of 12-hour days, and at night I'll be working on this channel just so I can make my passion work, because I need to be consistent doing this stuff as well. I can't just drop in and out of these types of things. You have to be all in or you might be out. But then after doing those hellish blocks of days where I feel like I have no life and I feel like it's never going to end, it ultimately does end, and I have a good chunk of change in my pocket. I'm able to take a breath, sit on my couch, talk to you guys, and just focus on the things that I really love to do. And that's a freedom that has only been allowed to me because I took the plunge. I left the 9 to 5 and I went after what really meant something to me. I'm still kind of finding that today. I'm kind of whittling that into something that is really what I love, continuing to design the life that I love for myself. It's not there yet, but it's definitely a lot better than it was 10 years ago, even 5 years ago, and even 2 years ago. So if you're feeling stuck in your life, if you're feeling like you're in a place that you don't want to be and you want to move on from that, don't give up. Don't feel like it's hopeless. There is a way out. You just need to put your nose to the grindstone, and you also need to get your head in the game. Do a little bit of thinking. Poke around on YouTube for inspiration. There's a lot of people living kind of radical, extreme lifestyles that you don't need to go that far, but they're good inspirations to kind of push you, break your state of mind a little bit, right? Shake you out of the normalcy that you may feel in your lifestyle as of now, and just show you what types of things are potentially possible for you, and you can move in that direction. Shoot for the moon and land amongst the stars is what they say. And I think if you watch stuff like that on YouTube, you're able to get these big pie in the sky inspirations and then try to go where works for you in that direction. And that's what I've done this time too. A lot of channels that have been inspiring to me throughout this path, I've mentioned them before. Forrest DeForest is an awesome YouTuber. He was huge for pushing me to leave the 9 to 5 and move on to something like what I'm doing now. He doesn't work in the film industry, but he's a guy who would work these factory jobs in his early 30s. He was doing, I think, 10-hour days, 6 days a week, nights at these factories, and he would work for months at a time, living very frugally, saving all of his money. And then after he had enough money saved, he would quit that job and he would go on like a month-long or multiple months-long bicycle tour, and he would film that and put it up here on YouTube. Eventually, he moved into a van in order to save even more money, and that's when his YouTube success came, and eventually he was able to completely leave the factory and focus on doing YouTube full time. So that story really just warms my heart, because you can see him if you go to his channel. I'll link this one video in the description where he's at a low point. He has first bought this van. His life just doesn't seem like it's that great. He's living in this little minivan in a parking lot in, I think, Hamilton, Ontario. If you know where that is, a very industrial part of the city as well. and he's just sleeping in this car. It looks very, very dreary. It's not a great scene. He doesn't seem overly happy. And then you watch his videos now, and his life's just completely changed. And it's because he didn't just settle into that factory job and just say, this was going to be my life for the rest of my life. He had other things he wanted to do, and he pushed towards those things, even if that meant living extremely minimally. I remember screenshotting a comment from one of those early videos that I really appreciated. Somebody asked him how he lives this lifestyle because it seems like something that maybe only somebody super rich can afford. And ultimately, he said it's because he makes sacrifices. He basically said that all of his stuff fits just in a few big, like Rubbermaid boxes. He lives extremely minimalistically. His backpack and his bike is prepped because he's always ready to leave. And he was always just saving for the next trip. And I think there is something to be gleaned from that comment as well. If you want to pass through the eye of a needle, right? I think this is kind of a biblical thing. If you want to pass through the eye of the needle, you got to be lean. If you want to do this extreme thing and come out on the other side in the lifestyle that you want, you have to be extremely lean. And in order to do that, you might have to make big sacrifices, right? Sell the stuff around you, things that you don't need. You just keep your needs, sell the wants. You might have to pack up your stuff and move to a different city or town if you want to get into a job that's more in line with your values. These things may seem like a sacrifice and it may seem extreme to do, but imagine working 40, 50 years in a job that you hate. That seems like a big sacrifice as well, and that seems too extreme for this guy right here. So I think I'm done rambling for today, folks. I hope you found this video interesting. Let me know in the comments what your experience is with the 9 to 5 job. Did you work in a 9 to 5 job that you hated and you moved on to something else? Let me know if that's the case. And also, let me know if it's the case for you, if you actually really like your 9 to 5 job, and how are you finding balance in that lifestyle that you're able to get all the benefits from it, but you're also able to kind of live a purposeful life of your own choosing outside of that as well. I'd be happy to hear from you in the comments section. Thanks very much for watching, folks, and I'll see you in the next video.